Hey, this is Sam Black with my first match with Copter Mardu. I lost the die roll, so I'm on the draw, and I have a fine hand. I have all of my colors, because this can find either red dual land and a bunch of early removal and a Soulfire Grandmaster, so easy keep, basically what I'm looking for. My opponent is playing a Swift Spear deck, which my deck is probably going to be pretty well positioned against. Blue-red means they're probably playing the Kiln Fiend thing in the ice deck. I'm not sure what other Spire Buff Canal Monastery Swift Spear deck is widely played right now. I would guess there isn't another, though there is the deck that I was working on that's similar but with Ascension instead of Kiln Fiend. That I guess I don't really know which one's better because I haven't played either or both a lot, but I liked the Ascension. So I'm going to take a hit here, but now I can attempt to deal with this. So Spear, maybe, there we go. Oh wow, that, I forgot that button is the full turn thing. Anyway, clearly I got a land and helixed the Swift Spear, and then it's my opponent's turn. Try just letting it go. My opponent probes me, plays thing in the ice, passes. I draw a land, and I'm gonna just Crackling Doom the thing in the ice because these don't kill it by themselves, and I don't really want to give my opponent a land when I don't have to. So then my opponent is going to Manamorphose and play Kiln Fiend. So I'm going to play Soulfire Grandmaster and bolt the Kiln Fiend. My opponent's going to bolt the Soulfire Grandmaster. The reason that I used bolt there rather than helix is because I thought that my opponent might have some kind of answer like Mutagenic Growth or maybe a Dispel or Apostle's Blessing. I'm not sure exactly what interaction the Kiln Fiend decks play, to be honest, but I thought that it was likely that my opponent would be able to save Kiln Fiend with an open mana, so I wanted to be able to cast 2 removal spells here. As it turned out, my opponent had a Mutagenic Growth, so that's fine. The Kiln Fiend will get saved, but I can just use the Path to Exile. And I decided to wait on Path because I think that it's unlikely that my opponent has a protection effect that'll save the Kiln Fiend, and even if they do, with only 1 card, I'm just not really exposing myself to much. This isn't a Death Shadow that's going to be suddenly hitting me for 12 or something. This is, well, I don't know, 6. This is a Kiln Fiend. It's going to hit me for not a lot when my opponent has 2 cards in hand, and I have a removal spell. So my opponent plays a Swift Spear, attacks with both, and I just take it. If I cast a spell there, if my opponent can interact, the other creature is going to hit me for more damage, and I just don't really think it's worth it. It's only 1 damage. I'm at 13. My opponent's not about to hit me for a lot. Also, and possibly most importantly, sorry, this is what I was thinking about in the game but didn't think about it here. If my opponent forced me to act, I could get planes, but I don't have 2 Sacred Foundries in my deck. So if I were to cast Path this turn, I wouldn't be able to cast Pia and Kiran Nalaar. So I really didn't want to have to get a white mana with this Marsh Flats. So unless my opponent had a way to push the issue, I was just going to get Blood Crypt tapped so that I would be able to cast Pia and Kiran. And if I hadn't drawn the Copter, I think there would be a case for playing Pia and Kiran, but since I can use my mana efficiently this turn, And getting Copter down is probably more threatening than getting Pia and Kieran down anyway. I think it was fired off the Lightning Helix. Obviously, if I'm using damage-based removal against this kind of deck, I'm always going to do it on my turn so that I don't get blown up by mutagenic growth. So I just fired that off on the Kiln Fiend, and now I'm at 16 because of the life gain from the Helix against a Swift Spear with 1 card in hand. And I have Copter to take over the game with Pia and Kieran backup, Shambling Vet to gain life, and Path to Exile to answer my opponent's creature. So I'm feeling pretty good here. And my opponent flashes back Faithless Looting. And hits me. And I'm just going to play Pia and Kieran, crew Copter, draw another path. At this point I just discard Copter. I have plenty of pressure, and I don't think my opponent's deck can win without... There's just no way that I'm going to take 14 damage without it being from creatures. So I don't really think that my opponent can possibly win the game if I just have double path. And here, my opponent casts Mutagenic Growth and then Bedlam Reveler. The Mutagenic Growth is obviously going away anyway, so I just fire it off. And at this point, if my opponent has Temur Battle Rage, this goes up to 10 trampling power basically, which isn't lethal but is a really big hit. Most likely they don't have it, they just have whatever they happen to draw off Bedlam Reveler, and there's already a Battle Rage in their graveyard. So rather than taking 4, which is a pretty big hit, I'm just going to jump block with a Thopter. I don't really need these Thopters. My opponent does have the Battle Rage, so I go to 5, but now I have paths for my opponent's creatures. And my opponent concedes to just one of the paths. I guess knowing that I can use Pia and Kieran sacrificing a Thopter to kill the Swift Spear afterward, which I believe is what I was going to do. So that was the first game. This is, I mean, kind of the matchup that this deck is built to punish. But second game, I kept a hand with no white mana on the draw with 3 1-mana interactive spells. Feel like that's a pretty safe keep, but there is a case to be made against it just because I do have 2 cards I can't cast, and about half my deck is cards that require white mana. But I just have quite a few draws and a lot of interaction to get there, so I think it's a clear keep. And my first draw was Shambling Vent, which I'm just going to play. It's not important. If I were playing Blackcleave Cliffs, I could have Bolt Up or cast Inquisition, but I don't think that it's important to do either of those right away. There's not a play that I'm expecting from my opponent on turn 2 that I would need to Inquisition. If my opponent were playing Pyromancer Ascension, it would be a different story, but any creature that my opponent plays, I can Lightning Bolt. And they can't play anything that matters right away other than a creature. Inquisition is kind of better later anyway, although I'm not necessarily going to wait on it for a long time just because I don't want to have to find a time to have the mana free later. So I'm going to fire off the Inquisition first, and my opponent has 2 Mutagenic Growths and a Reveler, so I'll take one of the Mutagenic Growths and bolt essentially the other Mutagenic Growth. And now my opponent's hand is just Reveler, but my opponent has a stocked graveyard, so Reveler's a really good hand. My opponent plays Serum Visions, because otherwise it would get discarded, and it does let them scry. Plus, as it turns out, find a Swift Spear, and they decide to cast Swift Spear here rather than playing Reveler and discarding the Swift Spear, which makes sense because they know that I'm a deck with a ton of removal, so they want to get as much value out of the Reveler as they can, so discarding an extra creature is not what they want to be doing with it. And now my opponent has 2 creatures, and I know that they don't have a removal spell. Their hand is just Reveler, so I'm going to get the guaranteed life gain off Soulfire Grandmaster while I can. I'm so just not that worried about a hit from a Swift Spear when my opponent's hand is just Bedlam Reveler. It's not going to suddenly hit me for 10 or anything. And the Soulfire Grandmaster is going to be starting to gain me life over time, which is going to invalidate the damage the Swift Spear is doing anyway. So my opponent probes into Manamorphose, into Serum Visions, and I think they're really just hoping to draw a land here so they can play a land and play Bedlam Reveler and not be down any resources while finally getting around to reloading. They don't find a land, so they discard Apostle's Blessing, and I'm fine just taking a hit from the Swift Spear since I'm gaining a bunch of life at this point. They don't have double white, so I can't cast Path and Crackling Doom, but I still don't really care about the Swift Spear. So, if I can get this thing to go forward, I'm just going to Crackling Doom the Bedlam Reveler and attack and go up to 19. And my opponent's going to Manamorphose and play Kiln Fiend and hit me for 2. And at this point, clearly I've kind of taken control. The only question here is the order of operations on attacking versus using a removal spell. If I attack first and my opponent blocks, obviously I pass because my creature is eating my opponent's creature. Then if my opponent plays an instant, I kill their creature, and that's all good. I trade 2 cards for 1 card, but I don't get the life gain from the Soulfire Grandmaster, whereas if I kill the Kiln Fiend and attack, then I'm getting the life off the Soulfire Grandmaster. I think getting the 2 for 1 sounds probably better, so I think that I should attack first. I don't remember what I did. I do attack first, good. My opponent just takes it, which is pretty clearly the thing to do here. And then I path the Kiln Fiend and Crackling Doom the Swift Spear. My opponent plays Thing in the Ice and Kiln Fiend. So they've drawn pretty well off the Bedlam Reveler. They have a lot of threats still. Here we see just the strength of Bedlam Reveler against these removal decks, where I've really executed my plan. I've killed all their threats, and I have a Soulfire Grandmaster and a lot of life. But at the end of it all, my opponent has 2 creatures and 2 cards in hand to my 1 creature and 1 card in hand. And, well, plus I'm up. I guess I have a Shambling Vent and a Soulfire Grandmaster to my opponent's Thing in the Ice and Kiln Fiend. So we both have 2 threats and 4 other lands. And then I have a Celestial Purge to my opponent's 2 cards. So that's about what you'd expect, given that my opponent drew 3 cards and I've played all 1-for-1s. So I'm counting on Soulfire Grandmaster to take over the game at this point, because I'm at the point where I have it in play and I have 5 mana, so I can start casting a spell multiple times. So that means that I don't want to fire off the Celestial Purge on the Kiln Fiend. I have enough life that I'm not worried about a hit from Kiln Fiend. My opponent still only has 2 cards, and I can gain life with Soulfire Grandmaster and Shambling Vents. So I want to wait until I can activate Soulfire Grandmaster and then cast Celestial Purge to cast Celestial Purge, because otherwise I'm at real risk of my opponent just grinding me out. So that means that this turn my play is going to be to animate the Shambling Vent and attack with both. So let's back up a second. I went over the advantage that my opponent has here. They're up a card on me, well, and they're drawing a card before I am. So they're kind of up 2 cards on me. They're up a card and a half. But I'm at 19 gaining 4, and my opponent's at 5, presumably blocking with Thing in the Ice and taking 2, going down to 3. My deck has 6 Lightning Bolt effects left, plus 7 because of Ajani. So 2 bolts, 4 helixes, Ajani, plus Crackling Doom and Kolaghan's Command each get most of the way there, and Pia and Kieran Nallar kind of gets all the way there, but slowly. The point is, my opponent's in huge life trouble here. So, Plan A is just pressure that, kill them before they can flip thing in the ice. My creatures are bigger than theirs, though not very big or anything. But I can just keep them on the defensive, gain life, have a cushion, and have a lot of outs to win the game immediately. And then the backup plan of take over with Soulfire Grandmaster. So, point is, the thing to do here is pressure them. You attack with both. My opponent makes the obvious block and falls to 3 and plays another thing in the ice. So now I can't get damage through it anymore, but still at 21, and I draw another land, so I can Celestial Purge with buyback essentially on the Kiln Fiend and attack just to gain 2 life. Now my opponent has 2 thing in the ice and my opponent's playing this deck that has a lot of cantrips, so they can flip them pretty quickly, but they're also at 3 life, so flipping them while it bounces my Soulfire Grandmaster, they still have to worry about this Shambling Vent, and I'm at 23. So their options are to attack for 14, in which case I can counterattack to put them at 1. If they choose to attack for 14, I would go to 9, and I would be able to go up to 11 on the counterattack, and they'd go to 1. And then if I block one of these, long story short, they take a line here that I think is too cautious. They're at 3, and as I've gone over, a lot of cards in my deck just kill them outright. And I don't actually have the mana to both attack with Shambling Vent and play Soulfire Grandmaster. And I think that they need to be, they're in a spot where they just have to be killing me. And I'm not representing lethal, I'm representing one short of lethal. And the one short of lethal that I'm representing costs 4 of my 6 mana, leaving me with 2 left. There aren't any cards in my deck that do 1 or 2 damage for 1 or 2 mana. So they're not actually playing around any cards by leaving this blocker back, and they're giving me at least a full extra turn. So I think this attack was pretty bad. Anyway, I take it. Of course, I'm tapped out. Fall to 16. And waiting for Moto. Alright. I draw a Johnny, which is one of my lethal cards, so it didn't matter how they attacked. This is just winning the game. And obviously I play it and finish them off. So that was the match.